Exactly. Right. That's what it is. So if someone is people pleasing, the reason that they're people pleasing, they're motivated to do that, not because they're attracted to the idea of people pleasing. They're doing it because they are trying to avoid the consequences of not people pleasing. Right. So they may have learned that disappointing people is terrifying. So if they're engaging in people pleasing throughout life, their body is constantly running away from something. It's constantly in a state of fear, which means that it's creating inflammation. So every single time that person is interacting with another person, what's actually happening is that their body is just in an inflamed state. And if that's happening over and over and over and over again, that's like playing a musical note that's out of tune. It's going to wear on that string, and that string is going to break sooner, you know? So that's why trauma is associated with chronic illness, because it's the pattern of experiencing fear over and over and over and over and over again, which wears the body down. Now, when I say that thing about anger, like you'll die faster if you're angry, that's what I'm talking about. And like, it's because those experiences of fear, anger, despair, overwhelm, they just wear our bodies out.
Yeah, they're way more taxing and they're way more energy consuming and like an all encompassing, I can't control everything. I mean, when you think of panic attacks, you know, people have literally lost control of their body. It's not like you choose. You're like, you know what? Today, 3:06 p.m. panic attack. Boom, let's go.
Yeah. Yeah. But you know, the thing about that is like, it's the same thing. The thing that makes a panic attack happen is trying to repress the fear, right? It's fear of the fear, and then the fear builds and builds and builds and builds and takes over the body. Whereas when a person learns to be curious about the experience of anxiety, it just doesn't happen. Like you bring curiosity to what your heart rate is doing, bring curiosity to the sensations in your body, then that part that believes that it needs to be anxious in order for you to survive whatever is happening, then it just totally reduces the volume on the anxiety. It doesn't have anything to fear anymore when it has that person's love. When it's being ignored, that's when it shouts. That's when it needs to be really loud, and it shows up and it feels like a heart attack because it's this little kid that's screaming for love and affection.
Yeah. You know, and based off exactly what you just said, the like if we go back to the systems thing, that frequency, whatever it is, like say it is someone like it and I love the way you explain that, like the fear of anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
whatever the frequency is for you, whether it's panic attacks or whether it's that, like what it's exactly what you said, you will resonate more with certain people or certain experiences, which is why you are stuck, which is why you are looping something. And that's like really what we're talking about. I love it because it's the way out of any situation in your life that you don't want, you know?
You know, you go ahead. Oh, I was going to say, what's such a beautiful thing. What I see happen all the time, like, you know, where you're saying, like, I've never met a therapist who's like, oh, be angry if you want to be angry, like that.
Well, the way you said it,
What's
yeah.
Yeah, and I hear that from people all the time. Just because, like people think that they're supposed to be a certain way, right? And not very many people are taught that they can choose to be however they want to be. The beautiful thing, what I love so much, like obviously what I want is for everyone to choose well-being, right? However, if I'm operating with the belief that well-being is better than fear, then I have a bias, and people can feel me trying to change them into well-being. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Whereas when a person experiences themselves in an environment and for the first time ever they're told, "Oh, if I want to be angry, I can take this to the furthest extreme possible. I can just do that." okay, well, I don't really want to do that anymore. It happens immediately. You know, it's
Yeah.
just, I see it over and over and over. It's such a beautiful thing. And what's really happening there is that they are just getting an experience of what it looks like to look at their own tendencies with curiosity and without judgment. And then immediately that person has access to doing that on their own. And when people are in that environment, they just choose well-being. I've never met a person who, when actually given the choice, would not choose well-being, who would continue to choose anger.
Yeah. And I think what you just said also sounds like you gave them an experience, because when you said it, I just felt acceptance, even though I wasn't necessarily giving you a personal example. I was just like, oh, that's such a nice feeling to just hear you say, like, hey, by all means, if you want to be angry, be angry. It's nice. It's like, oh, okay, because it takes away that whole thing of like, yeah, I'm angry all the time. I know I suck. It's like, well, no, not
Mhm.
necessarily. If that works for you, then go at it. I think like that's the acceptance part is what we often don't face, what we don't often don't see, because you can get really angry in some scenario and just experience like mounds of shame and people telling you how awful that was, how this was, and whether it's a therapist or yourself that can finally give you that acceptance for you to be like, oh, I'm not this terrible person. I think that's like step one, and like such a empowering step one.
You know that when you're speaking about that, I love how I love that you know that. I love that you're seeing that. I love how you're speaking about it. And what it makes me think of is kind of an interesting thing about therapy is that, so what you're speaking about is, oh, I don't have anything to hide, right? That's what that is. It's not needing to hide anything. I think I'm so lucky because uh, I just have people in my life who never gave me, like, the closest people to me never gave me a reason to hide things. Like, I'm thinking about my sister in particular. It was such a blessing to grow up with someone with such strong feminine intuition, to know everything that's happening in me more than I know what's happening in me, and to love all of it, you know? So getting that environment where everything is okay, there's no need for secrets, there's nothing to hide, creates this amazing experience of life. And of course, I've like spent a lot of time hating myself, and I've had to really learn how to do it for myself. But that's all that it is a person getting this experience of, oh shit, I don't have to invest energy into hiding this thing away. It can just be here. That's it. But a funny thing about therapy is it's such a like secretive confidentiality kind of thing. So in a way, therapy as an institution is like encouraging secrecy, while on the other hand, the thing that it's trying to do is to dissolve that secrecy.
Yeah, because I love that. I think it starts with secrecy because we go into therapy with so much shame around the things that we're admitting to, at least personally. It's like a lot of the things that I have talked about in therapy through the years, it's like I wouldn't be super comfortable getting on a podium in like a big stadium and being like, guys, guess what? Um, so I think that's part of the reason why. But then I don't know for other people, but I think for me, what therapy has become now is also like how you described accountability, like a place to seriously take account for the moments where I've been able to share more of who I am and feel safe doing so. I think
Mhm.
that it's interesting how it works because it's kind of like a catch 22. You know what I mean? It's like the privacy and the secrecy of it then kind of gives you leniency and like agency over your own life and over your own emotions to be like, you know what? It is safe to do this. It is okay
Yes.
to,
Yes.
I mean,
It creates a container. You
yeah.
know, it creates a container, and people, and not just people, but systems seem to really enjoy when there's a clear, obvious container. When there's a clear, obvious container, then you know the limitations, and then you know how to push the limitations and explore what you can get away with, you know? So you're so right. That clear, obvious container creates a certain level. Limitations create freedom. Whereas if you're questioning what the limitations are, you feel anxious and you don't experience as much freedom, you know?
Yeah.
So I think the thing about it is like you get this experience of clear container and this experience of freedom, and then your body becomes familiar with it, and you're like, oh, how might I want to create that in my life outside of therapy? What does that look like with this friendship? What does that look like with this relationship? What does it look like with business? So it's like a training grounds, but then really where the magic happens is where you take that and apply it to your own life.
Absolutely. And then you define the limits of your own life and your own relationships and like everything you just said. Oh,
Exactly.
that's so beautiful. I love it. And I think that takes me to something else that I wanted to talk to you about, which I think it falls into it quite seamlessly, which is about security, like being a secure person and versus like an insecure person. And when we're talking about this, I think it really makes me realize that that is exactly what insecurity is, like wanting to hide an aspect of ourselves and then overcompensating with another aspect of ourselves because we don't feel secure in that one aspect. And I wanted to talk to you about insecurity because it's such a, everyone knows what it is, right? Everyone knows what it's like to feel it. And at the same time, humans are so funny, and we will look at other people and we will just assume that that particular person must not feel insecure ever. You know what I mean? Which kind of only um not prolongs but like perpetuates our own insecurity. You know what I mean? It's like this weird thing of like not feeling secure and then comparing yourself to other people and then perpetuating insecurity.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, as far as I know, there's not a single person in the world who's not insecure. Well, I'll say that a clearer way. Every single person that I've ever met is insecure, has insecurities. I think the thing that matters is how you relate to your insecurities. So, like, for me personally, like I was saying with my relationship with my sister,
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that she and I are really good at doing is making fun of each other so well in the most loving way.
Yeah.
It's the making fun of is like it's doing a few things. It's like one, I'm showing you how clever I am. Two, I'm showing you that I see this part of you. Three, I'm showing you that I love this part of you. Like I want it to be there, you know?
Yes.
So having like a fun relationship with insecurities and being able to joke about them, I think is like huge. Because if you can joke about it, then how can you ever be hurt? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
if you love that part of yourself, how could you be hurt? And I think another thing to think about it. So when I think about times when I've been insecure, like teenage years, early 20s, I'm thinking about myself as like a 16-year-old showing up at parties, trying to present a certain persona, like wearing Levi's 501s below my butt with my underwear sticking out, like wearing Jordans, like really trying to present a particular persona, really believing that if I can correctly present the right persona, then I get to be safe, right? So it's all this analysis and calculation. What group of people accepts this thing? What group of people accepts this thing? What group of people rejects this thing? How can I present to this group of people so that they include me and like me? That's to me what insecurity is hyper analysis of trying to belong. Now, what I experience now when I go to parties, I don't think all that much about that. But when I do, I'm able to make fun of myself for it. But I'm clear on what I want to experience. Like if I go in wanting to have fun, then I'm just focused on having fun. And that means that I'm like dancing. I don't care that much about those sorts of things, which in a funny way, like not thinking about security or insecurity translates as being secure and confident. But it's not because I'm focused on presenting a particular persona. It's the opposite. It's a practice of being clear on what I want to experience and committing to the experience that I want to have.
Absolutely. I love what you're saying, and I think it applies to so many different things and in so many different ways, because I thought about doing this podcast for a year, just as like a different example. And I kept stopping myself. And I think over the last year, and maybe even more so, I've continued to feel very like unfulfilled by my both social media presence and like the way my social media engages with me. And I think I finally realized that it was so much of that had to do with being scared of just like changing what I had started creating when I was in my early 20s, and what worked for me then and what felt, fine then for whatever my reason at the time. And like allowing myself to both realize like, oh, okay, I've been overcompensating in this way because this is way more vulnerable and this makes me like terrified, and I think,
Mm-hmm.
but I it's not like I said to myself, well, you know what, I'm going to start this podcast because I've been insecure about it. It's like, actually, no, I did exactly like what it finally pushed me like over the, what's the phrase? Sorry, I'm Mexican. I
Edge.
forget. Yes, I forget. Was that like one day I was just so fed up. I was like, I don't want to feel this way anymore. You know what I mean? I don't want to feel this way when I open my social media. I don't want to feel this way on my days off or just when I'm browsing or whatever it was. And I was like, well, I need to do something about it. And I think now it's like, it's not that I've become like a more secure person. I think it's more so that I've been taking more like control or actions towards the things that, like you said, I actually want to feel. Like your party
Yes.
example goes into absolutely everything else as well, and then translates to security, even though that person is still battling with whatever it is they're battling when they're doing that thing.
Yes. 100%. So such a good point. And what that makes me think about is in my experience, like what I've experienced in my life, what I hear you talking about and what I see with people all the time. So I think that everyone has a vision of how they'd like things to be, right?
Yes.
You had a vision of having a podcast. You had a vision of how you wanted your life to be, right? If in a more micro experience, you might have a vision of how you want your experience at the party to be, right? What I think is like the medicine for insecurity is deciding to be bold enough to take that vision and turn it into reality. If you were still living your life avoiding creating this podcast, I mean, I don't know. This is an assumption, and you actually let me know if this is true. Like, but I
Yeah.
imagine that you'd probably be experiencing a whole lot more like self doubt and insecurity and frustration and anxiety because
Frustration for sure.
you're resist right.
Yeah.
You're resisting you're resisting taking that vision that you have and turning it into reality in such a funny way. Like that is to me the ultimate medicine, is to fully commit to taking whatever the vision is and turning it into reality. And in such a beautiful way, that can exist in the smallest of moments. Like that can be like, how do I want to brush my teeth? What's my vision of brushing my teeth right now? Am I trying to like go super fast and like hit my gums and bleed because I'm rushing? Or you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
or what I like, what's the vision that I have of how I want this to be? And how can I take the steps to actualize that vision? I think that if any person, if they are living their lives boldly committing to doing that, the insecurity, the anxiety and everything, it's going to be there, but it's just not the same. It's not debilitating. It's just like a smaller part of their experience.
Yeah, because security is definitely not like you're always happy, or like you never experience a negative emotion ever again. Because what you're saying also reminds me of like me moving to LA and being like, I'm going to be an actress. It's like, it wasn't like I didn't sometimes totally lose my shit and cry and just like, oh my God, what am I doing? And but there was another huge part of me that was like, no, but I want to be an actress, so I'm going to do that, and I'm going to take like tiny little steps. And there's so many different areas in that journey where I could have 1,000,000%. Like, I'm thinking of the first time that I applied for managers. Nobody accepted me. Like, nobody was like, I'll take you. And why would have they? Like, no, that makes no sense. But I think in that moment, I was frustrated. I was sad, all the things. But I think after like a couple days, I was like, well, maybe I should research better who would take me. And then I spent like some more time looking into that. And the next time I reached out to managers, I didn't reach out to 60 and like some massive, like attempt at getting representation. I reached out to, I think, 12, and very personalized, like I was really trying, and I got a response from three of them, which to this day I remember because I was like, oh, amazing. And I signed for the first time. And so much from that moment when I signed with like a legitimate person that believed in me changed like so much for me. But it wasn't because I was an insanely secure 21, 22-year-old girl, It was because
Hmm.
I was just really committed to taking that next step and that next step and then next step.
Yes. I'm so happy to hear that you did that. Like, that's so cool. Like, a 22-year-old girl being that bold, like making it happen. And the truth is like, I think that everyone has their version of a big story. I've personally never met someone who doesn't have like a grand vision for their life, right? Most people are spending most of their time judging that vision, afraid to start small, and avoiding actualizing that vision. I think most people are in spending their lives avoiding that. It just makes me so happy that you, from such a young age, fully sent it, fully committed, made it happen. I think that's fantastic. And the truth is that the people that I know who are fulfilled and satisfied are the people who are boldly committed to their big story. Whatever their big story is, their big story doesn't need to be like LA actress,
Yeah.
whatever their big story is, making that happen. That is where that's like the sweet spot of life, I think.
Yeah, I love that. And thank you for saying that. That was really nice.
Yeah. I'm so like there's always a little delay. You go ahead.
No, no, no. I didn't really have a thought. You tell me.
There's like it's just my favorite. It's my favorite thing when a person uh, gets to be the most expansive version of themselves. Like when a person gets to ask themselves, like, what do I really want? What does my life look like? What does the most expansive version of me look like? And get to be that. It's really my favorite thing. And uh, I think that I was having this conversation with a client of mine the other day. I think yesterday. I love this woman is so cool. And we were having a conversation like some people are people who want other people to be the most expansive versions of themselves,
Yeah.
and some people want people to be small. We were talking about why that is, and I don't really know why that is, but it is a really interesting difference to notice.
Yes, it's so funny. I was taking notes while you were talking because I didn't want to forget what I was just about to say. Um, but it's really interesting because I hear you and I'm like, I think I was my most expansive version of self at that age. You know what I mean? But one, you can't, for example, for me, I can't cling to like the victories of like my early 20s forever, you know what I mean, without actually keeping myself like in the pursuit of more, which I think is not more like more things, but of myself, of more of myself.
Hmm.
And I love that that's what you said earlier about the most fulfilled people are the people that are continuously bold, because who you are, keeps changing. And to be fulfilled and to be happy, like you also need to keep challenging yourself, whatever that looks like for you. And the other thing that I wanted to mention about like becoming the most expansive version of yourself, it's so interesting to me because I know this is going to sound super silly, and it kind of is, but I had an insane like rock bottom at 18 years old. Like when I graduated high school, I was very smart at like in school, like academia smart, where like you get good grades and all these things. And I really thought I was going to go to Yale. Like there was no like doubt in my mind. And what do you know? I didn't get in because it's Yale. It's really difficult. And I had this like existential crisis at 18 where I was like, who am I and what do I really want? And my plans had always been like, I'm going to go to Yale and I'm going to then become an actress. And I think the boyfriend that I had at the time was like, well, just like, why don't you just do the acting thing? Like he put it in my mind. And there was a big part of me first immediately that was like, I can't do that. Like what? Like not go to school, not do like, there was like all these thoughts. But then exactly what you're saying happened, where it's this like, wait, what do I really want out of life? What do I want my life to look like? What do I want for myself? And it's really interesting because like rock bottom led me to that, and perhaps like the most insecure I've ever felt and just like self-doubt and defeated that I've ever felt at that time in my life also like catapulted me immensely to the most like euphoric feeling ever of like, holy shit, I'm on this show now, or holy shit, and now I went through like some experiences this year with acting that kind of were, well, I mean, not kind of, that were just like really shitty as an actress, just immensely shitty. And really, it was like kind of like the same exact thing that happened. But in order to be like, well, what do I really want? Like, I want to have interesting conversations with people. I don't want to be inhibited by X, Y, and Z. And I think that this time what was different was that bold action wasn't just enough for me, you know what I mean? Because in therapy, I did talk a lot about, I think when I was younger, I was such a perfectionist, which I'm sure you as a therapist are probably like, yeah, I can tell. But I,
And the thought didn't cross my mind,
oh,
but when you're
great.
talking about like being really smart and Yale, I'm like, okay, yes, I can
Yeah, I can
see
see it.
those things. Yeah.
But when I was younger, I feel like maybe because I was so intense with like the things that I wanted to do right, that instead of, and this, I swear this all connects. I just got reminded of this by you when you said, some people want to see you be like big and relish in that, and other people want to see you be small. I I was met with a lot of like criticism, and I don't know what it was, but it became a thing that for me really defined so many decisions that I made that I've become aware of recently, where like I was really scared for being like ridiculed or put down. I know this sounds really strange, for doing my best. You know what I mean? Like it would be like freshman year and I wouldn't get my homework back, and then I'd go to the teacher and I'd be like, "Oh my god, my homework." And he'd be like, "Sit down." And then he'd like show my homework because I did a good job on it, or you know what I mean? And then I'd be met with a lot of like, "Oh god, so annoying." And that's been like a big thing
Hmm.
for me to
Hmm.
get over, if you will, or get past. And I've realized that part of the reason I didn't do this podcast is because I didn't want to be too much. Like that's why I'm calling it that because
Mhm.
sometimes you doing your best, you know, at whatever stage in your life, like I kept acting a secret. Like I told nobody about that. Like one day I was on a show and everybody saw it and it was like, holy shit, you know? But I told nobody about it because I think subconsciously I already had that in me where like, just don't tell anybody, like, you know? And now that I'm on a public platform, it's like that didn't work for me anymore. So like that's what I mean by like not
Mhm.
being able to do bold action. And I think sometimes it's also okay, like if you are unable to take bold action for whatever reason, I think like what we've kept talking about curiosity, like it's totally okay to sit down with yourself and really like look at what it is that is stopping you so that you can do exactly what you said, which is like accept that part and like comfort it and be like, hey, no, you're gonna be okay because you know you're not too much, so you're not, no matter what comments you get or what, when this is aired or released or when you actually do the thing, it's like you're going to be okay because now you know this about yourself and your past and you can accept it. So that's a very long story, but I think it's like a lot of what we were saying.
So what you learned was that it wasn't safe to be like your most expansive self, to be successful in the ways that you were capable of being successful. You learned that like the rules were that you weren't allowed to be that you would get ridiculed or rejected for it.
Yeah, the rules were that that was like off-putting to others in a way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So then that part of you learns that the best survival strategy is to be small. And that's the thing about those parts is like in some ways that part was right, you know, and when you're a teenager in high school, it's life or death to figure out how to fit in. So that part is correct. But then in adulthood, you're like, no, fuck that. We're fully sending this. We're doing the biggest thing that we can do.
Yeah, and I also think that with like someone either, you know, wanting people to succeed or not, I think what we also have to remember is that we're all projecting sometimes. You know what I mean? Like you doing something might make someone feel like they're less than, but it's not because you're better than, and it's not because that person is less than. It's because that person has learned that they are less than based on their experiences and that's what they believe, but that's not your fault. You know what I mean? Like when I was younger, that was not my fault. I just didn't understand that. And I think now it's like, and I'm sure this applies to other people listening, like you can also give yourself that permission of like, you know what? I get to show up and do what I'm good at and explore different aspects of myself and avenues in life without having to apologize it because it might bother someone.
Yeah, I was just speaking about this exact thing with a client today. I mean, the amount of people who I think that most people that I interact with have learned this thing that they have to be smaller in order to make other people comfortable and in order to like appease to other people. It's such like a it's such a sad thing to have learned, you know, like thinking about those little kids in all of us or those teenagers in us who like learned that and wanted this thing, but they were learning that it's not okay to want that thing and they need to be something else. Like that's just like I do not like thinking about people having to experience that. That's why that thing gets me so excited. Like it's this kind of a corny example, but like a flower, for instance, when a flower perceives itself to be in an environment where it's not safe to blossom, then it doesn't blossom, you know? When the flower perceives itself to be in an environment where it's safe to blossom, then it just does that. It doesn't have to try to do it, you know? And ultimately, that environment when we're teenagers is a result of our parents, culture, the kids that we're at school with, but as we get older and older, we get better and better at being the ones who are choosing that environment ourselves, because we're choosing like the relationships we're in, we're choosing the places that we're in, but the most important environment is like what is happening internally, the way that we're relating to ourselves. So if we're relating to ourselves in these loving, warm, curious ways, we're creating a life affirming environment, which just allows that blossoming to happen. If that life affirming environment is there, there's nothing to be afraid of anymore. And one of my favorite things to do is like, I think a lot of therapists, a lot of people in like mental health ish space will be like, something like, oh yeah, like they're just having their own experience, or oh, they're probably not even thinking about you anyway, that kind of thing, you
Mm-hmm.
know. I think the most helpful thing to do is to find the part of you that really does believe that everyone is talking shit about you and needs to be small, and let that part be the most afraid, and let that part learn that it can be the most terrified that it could possibly be, and you will still love that part. If that happens, then that part has nothing to be afraid of anymore, because it knows that its access to love is unconditional. So that I think is a really important thing. Like people try and convince themselves and intellectualize like, oh, people aren't even thinking about me. That keeps you limited. The way
Mm-hmm.
to go next level is to be truthful about the part that is terrified of people judging you, and develop a relationship with that part.
Oh, I love that. That's so powerful. And I think that that's like all these examples that you've given of like doing something for yourself. I think that is what most people are trying to express anyway when they say like, you know, the things that you seek from other people, like you should give them to yourself. But then that's so vague. And I think that sometimes that to people that means like, oh, I guess I'll go out to dinner alone, you know, when it's
That's
like
what people
yeah,
think.
when it's like
Yes.
when it's like actually no, that's not
Like
it.
that could be part of it, but like that's not the thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's such a good example. That's hilarious.
I see that so much and I'm like, guys, no, like that's not the thing. But
Like I'm gonna take myself out on a date
yeah.
tonight. Like that energy,
Yeah.
yes.
And you know when you were speaking, it's really interesting because I think what like we'll air this around late January, if not February. So like Valentine's is right around the corner. And I feel like what you're actually describing is some of like the insecure tendencies that lead us to like really unhealthy coping mechanisms in other people, and also being attracted to other people that like quote unquote are not good for you, and also this whole thing of like making dating complicated because it's like, oh, what should I do? It's like it's actually not that hard, you know, but we make it really hard because we take all of these, like we do either what you said of like, oh no, he just hasn't looked at his phone, you know, type of thing, that's why he
Yes,
hasn't texted me.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Or we do what the other thing that you said, but we don't accept it. We kind of hate ourselves for that other aspect of like, oh my God, if I never hear back from this person, I'm like gonna hate myself. And oh my God, that must mean X, Y, and Z. Instead of doing what you said, which applies to these situations actually verbatim.
You're so right. That like Yale intellect is coming through, where you're seeing those examples and applying them perfectly. That's exactly right.
Wow, thank you. I feel so validated right now.
Yep.
um, so let's talk a little bit more about that. Like, how like maybe our concern for other people or like playing games or dating, like how does security, you know what I mean, and like accepting those aspects about ourselves, like I don't know how to pose this question, but like what's the advice there, like when it comes to dating or seeking a partner or what have you, and you know what I mean, like how would you approach it, I guess I don't know if that's like an actual question.
That's a great question. It's in kind of a boring way. It's the same answer that I would give to any other question, which is if you know what you want, that thing about wants, if you know what you want and you know how to relate to yourself in a way that gets you what you want, I think many things in life become very clear. So if we're talking about dating and I'm saying like, what do you want? Like a lot of people might answer that with like a description of Steven from The Bachelor. You know what I mean? Like 6'2", you know,
Yeah.
like good family, like like good. He doesn't need to be too rich, but like good job, like that kind of
Yeah.
stuff, right? Like,
Yeah.
so all of those things, how tall he is, how hot he is, like all that stuff exists on the level of what you can see and then the thoughts that you have about them. You know what I mean? Oh, this job makes sense. Like it's whatever. It's all that shit. What we want are feelings. So if I'm clear that what I want, let's say I have 10 main feelings that I know that I want to be experiencing. And let's say those feelings, it's like, it's fun, it's sensuality, it's joy, it's groundedness, it's peacefulness, it's playfulness, it's like what other ones, inspiration, bunch of things like that,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I'm clear on what I want and I know how those things feel in my body, right? And let's say I'm living my life where I'm like, okay, I don't think about things as healthy or unhealthy. I think about things as what helps me feel what I want to feel and what doesn't help me feel what I want to feel. So I'm eating my breakfast and I'm paying attention to whether my food helps me feel the things that I want to feel. And the way that I'm speaking to people, I'm paying attention. Like, is this interaction, is the way that I'm speaking to them helping me feel what I want to feel, right? If a person is living like that, where they're clear on what they want and they're paying attention to the patterns in life, being discerning, seeing what is getting them what they want and what's not, then Steven comes into their life and Steven might check off all the boxes, but is boring as fuck.
Right.
Or is like, is an asshole. I'm actually not even going to be judgmental and say asshole. Or does the thing where he's like, he's out with the boys and hits you up at 12:58 at night.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
You up?
Like, yeah, exactly. Right. So let's say that's what Steven is doing consistently, even though he's checking off all these boxes on the level of awareness of what you can see and the things you think. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But Steven's patterns for how he shows up, well, I feel depleted. I feel anxious. I feel overwhelmed. Do I want those things? If yes, then Steven seems like a good person to invest my energy into, because his patterns seem to be creating these experiences in me. If no, if I don't want to feel anxious and overwhelmed and all that, then, and I know that I'm living my life holding myself accountable to feeling what I want to feel, then it's very easy for me to not become attached to the idea of Steven giving me something that I want, because I already have what I want. And I know, I trust myself that I'm going to continue to refine that process and get better and better and better throughout my life of making choices that get me the feelings that I want. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The reason that we want Steven is because it's a part of us that believes that Steven's validation or being the one that changes Steven or Steven's whatever, that is my primary source of love. So if I'm experiencing myself as in an environment where love is a scarce resource, or affection or sensuality or joy or fun, if I see that as a scarce resource in my life and then I have this thought that Steven's affection or changing Steven is going to get me that thing, then my body starts to experience Steven like I'm deprived of oxygen, and this is my only source of oxygen. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So for me, the system is clear on what you want, holding yourself accountable for getting what you want, and then evaluating the things in your life honestly, asking yourself, are these things contributing to what I want, or are they depleting me and taking away from what I want? If a person is living that life, it is very easy to say bye to someone like Steven. But if a person is not experiencing that, then I think like becoming addicted to those kinds of relationships is like, it actually makes sense energetically. If you think that that is your only source of love, then it makes sense to go for that to experience love.
Yeah. I mean, I 1,000,000% agree with what you're saying. I just find it really interesting that people will break up with someone, for example, that for certain characteristics, but then the next person that they're dating, it's like the exact same thing. And they either don't see it, which is, that's a whole other perhaps problem, if you will, in the sense that there's like that relationship or that dynamic is still serving a purpose perhaps for that person. But I find it really interesting that people that say that they don't want all of these things, like I have girlfriends that like, I'll see them talk themselves into a situation where like he is not going to change, or like it'll end up being exactly what they thought it could be in the worst scenario, right? And then they'll do this thing where they'll be like, oh, well, I just know that if I had not slept with him so fast, or if I had done this and XYZ different, that it would have been different. And it's like, no, actually, it wouldn't have been different. It would have been the exact same, because you're dealing with a specific type of person. Like, it's almost like self-shaming, you know what I mean? Like perpetuating this thing that like I somehow fucked up because I'm what's wrong here. Like there's something wrong with me. I feel like
Yep.
that, like, I think based off what you're saying, also, like, if you constantly feel that way, like at the end of a relationship or with a breakup, or when someone, it doesn't work out or whatever it might be, that I think that's, and I don't know if, I don't want to say that that's where people go wrong in like a judgmental sense, but I think some like relationships and breakups and bad relationships are such an amazing opportunity to truly be like, okay, because I think this is what happened to me, where I was like, after the last really bad one, I was like, interesting. They are all like this. You know what I mean? Like there is something here that I am doing. And I think until you want to face that, what you said, it's like it'll be very simple to say no to that like really boring or really rude or really immature Steven, if you're very clear that you don't want that in your life anymore. But if you're not clear about that and you haven't done anything to appease that part of you that is super attracted to those dynamics in Steven, because Steven could be that one miracle person that changes, then you are going to perpetuate Stevens forever and ever.
So you remember how we spoke about, do you think it's with a PH or with a V for him?
I see it with a V because to me that's douchey. Like, I don't know.
I
Or,
see that
yeah.
too. I see that too. So probably because we're both thinking about Steven from, was it Laguna Beach?
Oh, I don't
Do you remember
know.
that show?
No.
Whoa, okay. There's this show, I think it was called Laguna Beach. And
No, no, I thought you were, for a second you were gonna say The Hills, and I was like, wait, where? What?
that's what I'm
It,
talking about. That's what I'm
oh,
talking
okay,
about.
okay,
Steven
okay.
from the Hill.
Yeah.
Yeah, like hot kind of douchebag Steven.
Oh my God, such
That's
a
what I
mess.
was thinking about.
Yeah, yeah.
Like if I were a girl and I were 22, I get it. I would be obsessed with Steven. I get that. But that thing about accountability, um, remember what we said, like taking account of the patterns, taking account of the experiences. So if I'm noticing myself engaging in a relationship with a person who's got these qualities, right? The thing that's actually happening is how I'm feeling. So if I continue to be in a relationship and I'm noticing anxiety, a pattern of anxiety in relationships, what's happening is that a part of me is choosing anxiety. It's a part whose goal is to experience anxiety because it actually believes that anxiety is the appropriate survival response. It believes it needs to be experiencing that. Why that is, a million reasons. And that's one of those things where like it would have to be like one-on-one working with the person to understand why that is.
Of
But
course.
what's actually happening is you're not choosing a person, you're choosing anxiety because a part of you believes that it needs to be experiencing anxiety. It's not about the other person. When you commit to a relationship, you're committing to a version of yourself. And if you're noticing patterns of anxiety in your relationship, it's just that's what's happening. So if you'd like to commit to a different version of yourself, a more grounded, loving, calm, whatever version, then it's like that shift has to happen in order to attract a person in your life who is going to be supportive of that version of yourself.
I love that because I think the key word is that you are choosing that because that you because you know what I mean. I think it takes away like the victim thing of and granted you could be a victim. You know, I'm not talking about like victims of domestic abuse or anything like that. But what I am saying is that it gives you a lot of power, you know. I think it's easier in the beginning. Like if in the beginning you keep seeing signs of this anxiety showing up or perpetuating, I think that is what you are signing up for, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I think people ignore those signs for a lot of reasons. Like most kids when growing up are not taught that their body is telling them some kind of truth. Kids' intuition is super sharp. And what happens is like these kids feel these things that are like the truth of the dynamics happening. And then adults who are not that aware will
Hmm.
try and convince the kid that what they're experiencing is not true and this is how it actually is. So it creates all this doubt and uncertainty about like how our the information that comes from our bodies. So then a person grows up and then applies that to dating and they're experiencing anxiety in the beginning, but then they're on the level of awareness of their thoughts, trying to convince themselves that this time it's okay. I could change this person rather than just paying attention to how it feels and making choices based on that.
Yeah. I mean I love that. I think also sometimes and even though this is based on the person, I think it's kind of uncanny how sometimes you'll realize how much um you can be acting like your mom or your dad in a dynamic. You know what I mean? Because I think that's also like a bit of what you're talking about. Like maybe you noticed as a kid that something was off or you felt anxiety around it, but then you kind of also learn to normalize it and think of it as like the way that relationships are. So I think that's also like a thing that therapy is very helpful with, you know, like some of the things that you keep attracting are just the things that you're familiar with, and you can change that. You can absolutely choose differently.
That's exactly right. It's to your subconscious, safety is determined by familiarity, right? So, you know what I'm saying? Like, if a person believes that anxiety is their best survival mechanism, that might be because as a little kid, they felt all this anxiety witnessing their parents' relationship and their model of a relationship was anxious. So then they're like, okay, well then I need to have a relationship. A relationship means anxiety. So that's just what this is. That's what I'm familiar with. That's what's safe. And to your subconscious, what's safe is what you will have. So it's about creating a new version of safety which just means I love that you use the word familiarity. It just means becoming familiar with something else, a relationship that feels a different way.
Yeah. And even becoming familiar with your own anxiety that shows up so that, like, when it does show up, you can be like, oh, hello. You know what I mean? But not choose someone that brings it up in you constantly.
Exactly. Exactly.
Flynn, thank you so much. This was an absolute pleasure for me. And I hope at some point I can bring you back again and we can dive deeper into more relationship stuff because I know it's like an endless well. But tell me where people can follow you and learn more about you and all those good things because I love following you. Like, genuinely, if I don't see your post, I like go to your profile and I'm like, is there a new video? I
Do
love
you
it.
really?
I do. I'm not even joking about that. I really do because I love the way you put things. And I think it's like the type of content that I actually want to consume because it makes me think, like, versus just feel depleted. I'm like, huh, interesting. Yeah. How do I do that or not do that? Or how can I apply that? So tell us where we can find you.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, there's a pretty involved and engaged community happening on Instagram in the comments on my profile. So I'm at Flynn Skidmore, and I really enjoy speaking with people in the comments. So if you're a person who like actually wants to be engaging with this stuff and asking questions and interacting, I would be so happy to have you there.
Yeah, I actually always read the comments in your I
They're
always
great,
they're
right?
amazing. I love it.
The people are so smart, like so insightful, so experienced. I'm really lucky to be part of that, and you're part of that. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. It really does feel like a sense of connection, like what social media is intended for. So, if anyone out there is looking for that, I highly, highly, highly recommend your IG.
Thank you so much. And I'm sad for you that you didn't get into Yale, but I'm also really happy for you that you didn't because it sounds like that's exactly what needed to happen.
Thank you. It is. It is. I've made my peace
Hmm.
with it. I'm happy. I'm pretty happy with how my life went.
You obviously could go have gone to Yale. Like we know that, and you just went on to do cooler things.
Thank you. The
Mhm.
what do people say? Rejection is redirection sometimes.
Ooh, I've never heard that, but I like that a lot.
Yeah, so that was me, and if that's you, then that can also be you. All right. Well, we're gonna sign off. Thank you. Bye.